On the podcast today, my co-host Matthew and I interview a longtime friend of mine, Pastor Ryan King. Pastor King is a Canadian pastor, but he received his theological training here in the States. It was during that season of his life where I got to meet him, and together he and I served the Lord at Good News Youth Center in Indianapolis. Pastor King currently serves as the pastor of Golden Harvest Baptist Church in Fort Erie, Ontario, Canada, and previous to that, he was the longtime pastor of Bethel Baptist Church in Westville, Nova Scotia, Canada. Ryan and his wife Jacinda, they have 3 charming children, and as you'll see in this podcast, Ryan is a down-to-earth guy, and he's a whole lot of fun. If you're looking for strength for your life, I assure you, you will experience it in this interview.
Welcome to the Strength for Life podcast with Pastor James C. Johnson, a ministry of NorthStone Baptist Church in Pensacola, Florida.
Pastor Ryan King, thank you so much for being our guest today on the Strength for Life podcast.
Well, thank you for having me.
How long have we known each other?
Almost 25 years.
Is that what you've calculated? When did we meet?
The year 2000, I think.
Okay. And did we meet at the youth center or did we meet at Monty's church?
Probably met for a hot second at Monty's church, but we got to know each other at the youth center.
Yes.
Because I started in 2000, and I think you did the year before?
I started in 2000 as well.
Okay.
Yeah, May of 2000 for me.
Okay, so I would have been maybe 2001, maybe the summer. Anyway, somewhere in there. But it's been almost a quarter century.
That is awesome. Yeah. We've been friends a long time.
Been a long time.
Yeah, it really is an honor to have you on our podcast, all the way from Canada.
All the way from Canada.
Just to be here.
Yeah.
That and your son, of course, is
Yes.
in Pensacola Christian College. Yeah, that's really cool. So, do you have any youth center stories? For those that are not familiar, Ryan and I co-labor together in ministry at Good News Ministries Youth Center in Indianapolis, east side of Indy. If you're familiar with Indianapolis geography, corner of Washington and rural. So it's hood stuff over there. So Ryan and I were trying to deliver the gospel, be heralds of the gospel for inner city kids. I was there 8 years. How long were you there?
3.
3 years, okay. And you were in Indianapolis area getting schooling.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and at IBC. And were we in classes together? Forgive me for not
We
remembering
would
all these details.
likely.
Likely, yeah.
There wasn't a lot of options to IBC, so we probably were in the same classes together.
Yeah, what recollections do you have of the youth center? Tell us about that.
So the youth center was transformational for me. So I grew up in small country town, and the inner city was not something I'd ever experienced before. And you and I had gone through all kinds of both triumphs and tragedies in those years at the youth center. So the one that stands out for me as far as culture shock is one day you come and get me because one of the twins got his bike stolen.
Demone and Remone, identical twins.
And so we go, and I'm driving like that old Buick LeSabre. Again, I'm not hood, I'm not inner city, I'm country folk. Trailer trash. And so we're going to go find this kid's stolen bike. Do you remember the story at all?
I do, yeah.
And so we're driving through the hood, and we find it, and you say to me, I need you to leave the car running and pop the trunk as I go deal with this. And so I am pretty close to panic, thinking, we're going to get shot. And we find the bike in this front yard, and there's these 3, guys in their 20s on the porch, smoking weed, drinking beer with this stolen bike. And you go to try to finagle getting this bike back.
Right, yeah.
And then here you come, carrying this bike over your shoulder, throw it in the trunk of the car.
Trunk popped.
The trunk is popped, and off we go.
Yeah, right.
I remember thinking, this is not what I had ever thought I'd be doing.
What did I sign up for?
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's funny.
And then, of course, the tragedy is when we were both there for Ronnie's death. And that's something that I've used in my ministry. That when I have with my youth pastors, I go over that and explain just when things go wrong and when problems happen, you can deal with it. Like as long as you don't lose a kid, then everything else is manageable.
Right.
And of course, then that was
Ronnie drowned.
a tragic
at Raccoon Lake.
That's right.
16 years old.
Yeah.
Got saved not long before that incident, so we get to see him again in heaven.
In fact, the night before, we're sitting around the campfire.
Yeah.
And he says, I just want to go to heaven so bad. I hate
Yeah.
everything about my life, and
Mm-hmm.
next day he's in the presence of Jesus.
Yeah.
But it was still a hard time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So those are two pretty well. And the other thing that pops up is, again, I've always been kind of a naive, gullible, believe the best in people.
Sure.
And this little girl comes in and she says, we have no food at the house. And so you and I are going to be these bastions of righteousness and help out the family with food. And so we get like 4 or 5 boxes full of food, and not just canned stuff, but like milk and ham and eggs and
Yeah.
bacon.
Load her up.
And we go to this little girl's house, and we knock on the door, and we go in, and there's 3 dudes on the couch playing Xbox on a TV the size of this wall, smoking weed, drinking beer.
Yeah.
They got everything but food.
Right.
And that was my introduction to some people gaming the system.
Yeah. Right.
Again, well, it's just grown-up lessons.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah, I relate to that. Yeah. Matthew, what are your thoughts about some of these things?
Oh man, I mean, well, being the person that I am, when he talks about that food, I think of the nutrients in the food. And I asked you this previous, but I'd like to ask you on the podcast, would you consider yourself to be someone who's food informed?
I am a medium.
A
food
medium
informed.
level of food informed, okay.
Medium food informed.
Medium,
Matt
and
is T1D. Matthew is
That is
type 1
true.
diabetic. So
Yes.
he's extremely food informed as far as proteins, fats, and carbs. He has to be for the sake of his lack of pancreas. You have liberties that he doesn't have. So
Right.
yeah, food information for you is different than it is for him.
yeah,
It's not life or death for me.
right. I mean, it is for me, and it isn't at the same time. As long as you take care of it, it's not that bad at all. But my question for you is, do you have some sort of like a diet that you follow, or like something you try to restrict in any way as you eat?
Yes. So I've lost about 30 pounds. And through that is just trying to make some smarter food choices. And so, again, I'm not obsessive about it, but, like lunch today, brown rice instead of white, right? Cabbage instead of French fries or whatever the options were. And just restrict processed foods and restrict fast food and just try to be smart about things.
Yeah.
But I'm not obsessive. If I sit down and someone hands me a donut, I'll eat the donut and thank Jesus, and then I'll eat one tomorrow.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah, Tim Hortons up in Canada.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Right.
good food.
Yeah, good coffee up there. And you stay reasonably active. I follow you on Strava, and you've kind of got into running over the last several months because a guy in your church kind of motivated you. Can you talk to us about your activity level and that type of
Sure. So this will go with goals. We might talk about it later on. As I grow old, I don't want to grow old afraid. I want to be physically fit and mentally sharp enough that I can grow old with confidence. And so that got me to making some lifestyle choices so that I'm not old and afraid, including then trying to get into at least some reasonable shape. So one of my short-term goals is I have in October a half marathon that I've scheduled to run.
Wow.
Great.
And never done anything like that before. There's a guy in my church who's run 28 full marathons.
Wow.
So he's my training partner. And I don't really enjoy running, but
I don't at all.
Yeah,
It's painful.
I hate it.
Yeah.
more than anything.
I do it, but it is painful, and it's fun with people.
yes,
Yeah, my sons have run with me. Pastor Jonathan is off camera here. I've run with him quite a
not
bit.
fun by yourself.
Not fun by yourself, because you can, like escape the pain a little bit with dialogue.
Well, and if you've ever been driving and you see someone run by you, their face is always a picture of misery, right?
Yes.
No one runs
No
with a
one's
smile on their
smiling.
face.
Oh, yeah.
Tongues hanging out and
Yeah.
grimace on their face.
And if I'm running by myself, more than likely I'm not running, I'm walking. So
Yeah.
There's a lady in our church. She has a sign in her house. It says, "If you see me jogging, kill whatever's chasing me."
yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Those are funny. Tell us about some of your like numbers right now. Like so Andrew and Mark and Pastor Johnson are really into running, and so like I don't run with them. I think they said they were going to run 10 miles this morning or yesterday or something like that, which like they invite me to that stuff, but I'm not running 10 miles. That's way too advanced for me. So like where are you, like could we run together? Are we at that same level together?
So I started in January,
Okay.
and then I don't know what the equivalent would be, but I had done a couple 15-kilometer runs,
Okay.
and then I got hurt.
Like 9.
And so I ended up tearing the ligament that connects my groin muscle to my pelvic bone. So that took me off for almost 3 months.
Oh man.
And so I've been in physio getting back in. So I've just been cleared now to do some 7Ks, which I
Okay.
think is 4 miles.
Yeah.
And so I thought I did that. I did a 4-miler this morning.
Nice.
Good.
So I'm not up to 10, 20, not yet, but that's in the progression.
Gotcha.
But I got set back by getting hurt.
Very nice.
And you're comfortable at about a 9-minute mile. Would you say that's true? Is that a zone 2 for you where you can do? I mean, would you say that's where you're comfortable?
Yeah, if I was to run like 4 miles or something, I would probably try to be at like a 9 minute, little slower than that maybe.
I don't have a good answer for you. I have no idea.
Okay. Yeah.
It took me,
Get it
it
done.
took me 45 minutes to run 4 miles this morning.
Okay.
So
Solid.
not
Yeah.
quite.
Yeah.
I don't know what that would be.
I respect it though, as opposed to just staying under the covers.
Exactly.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
potato
yeah.
chips on the couch.
Sweat.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, exactly.
I feel good about myself if I get in the car and I don't turn the AC on and I start sweating. I feel good about that.
Right. Now, Pastor King, you have pastored 2 churches in your ministry,
Yes.
both in Canada. Tell us about each of those churches, maybe the areas and the contrast between the faith families you ministered to.
Sure. So Canada, as opposed to the U.S., culturally goes east to west instead of north to south. So I grew up in the west, north of Montana and Washington State. And then when I left Indiana, I went to Nova Scotia, which would be go to Maine and then turn right 5 more hours. And so the Maritimes would be, if you had to find an equivalent, would be like the deep south of the U.S. culturally. And so slower pace, family oriented.
Do they have a fun accent?
Newfoundland has a fun accent.
Newfoundland is a fun word to say.
Oh yeah, Newfoundland has a fun
It
accent for
sounds
sure.
like a town in a Dr. Seuss book.
Yeah, and the farther you get to the coast, the harder it is to understand them.
Okay.
And then Ontario would be like the north, where I'm at now. So it's much faster paced. People are different. It is culturally quite different.
Okay. So Ontario is how far from like New York City? Is it that same vibe? Hustle and bustle, busy type?
Well,
of
so
thing?
Toronto would be. So we're 2 hours from Toronto.
Okay.
We're right across the river from Buffalo, and so but it wouldn't be like right downtown Manhattan, but it would still be hustle and bustle, and
Yeah.
everyone's in a hurry.
Yeah.
People like to spend money.
Okay.
It's different than the deep south.
When you say right across the river from Buffalo, you mean it.
I mean, right across the river.
Yeah.
So I can actually walk from my house to the Niagara River and see New York State in 3 minutes from walking. And so one of the places I run is up and down the Niagara Parkway along the New York River,
Okay.
the Niagara River, and it's beautiful.
That's awesome.
In fact, so my half marathon is going to be along the Niagara River from Lewiston, New York. It's going to be on the Buffalo side.
Okay. Yeah.
That'd be pretty. Now, when you say Canada, my mind automatically goes to it's freezing cold all the time. So, but we talked about this at lunch a little bit. Is you described it as being just hotter than in Canada where you live than it is here?
No, not hotter, but close. So where we are in southern Ontario, if you look at a map, you have the 49th parallel that goes on the western side of the country.
Love the 49th parallel.
So, quick story. So my family actually has pretty deep U.S. roots on both sides.
Hey,
On my
man.
mom's side, they fought in the Civil War and then moved to Canada after that. On my dad's side, great-grandpa was a blacksmith in Great Falls, Montana. And around the turn of the century, he had bought a quarter section, which is like 250 acres or somewhere close to that, in a sod shack in northern Montana, and moved up there to start this farm. And he's up there for 3 or 4 years, and the surveying crews came out to map the 49th parallel, and they found out that he was actually a mile north of the U.S.-Canadian border.
Ooh.
So the whole time he thought he was in Montana was actually in Alberta,
Okay.
Wow.
and he stayed. So we say the Kings became Canadians by bad directions, thinking they're in Montana
That's
the
funny.
entire time.
The 49th parallel made you Canadian.
But if you look in a map, southern Ontario goes pretty far south,
Okay.
and it's the same latitude as Northern California.
Okay.
So it gets hot and humid.
Yes. Love that.
Okay. It's been extremely humid summer here in Pensacola.
Yes, Ontario's the same way. Now, Nova Scotia was not this way.
Uh-huh.
Much cooler, much shorter summer season.
Okay. So you made kind of parallel between how the states, we divide kind of culturally north and south.
Yes.
And you said east and west. Would you say the people at Bethel Baptist out in Nova Scotia were like pastoring a totally different type of person
Yes.
than you're pastoring in Ontario? And what are some of those distinctions in specific in the faith families?
Well, just like from the north to south here, right? And so you have very strong family ties, slower pace, people aren't in a hurry to get things done, a lot of very self-sufficient people, a lot of folks built their own homes
In Ontario?
in Nova Scotia.
Okay.
In Ontario, it's almost a mark of, you made it when you don't have to mow your own lawn. You pay for someone to do it for you,
Or you just have sons.
or you just
Yeah,
have
just have
sons,
sons.
right?
Right.
And a lot of money flows out. People pay for a lot more things.
Yeah. Talk about politics in Canada. I hear a lot about Justin Trudeau. And the thing that people keep joking about Justin Trudeau is this blackface thing. They're showing that constantly
Yes.
on the TV in the States. So like, and then of course COVID, we kind of figured out where our governmental leaders stood in relationship to local churches. So can you talk to us a little bit about politics and COVID in Canada?
So before we get to politics in Canada, Canada's favorite sport is hockey. And our second favorite sport is U.S. politics. We love U.S. politics. It's like a car wreck. When you drive by, you just can't keep your eyes off the road. In fact, the average Canadian will know more about American politics than our own. Absolutely.
Okay.
What's the question?
Yeah.
What was the question?
Yeah. Talk to us about Justin Trudeau and
yes.
COVID and all that.
So Trudeau, we are not Trudeau fans.
Okay.
He is destroying the country, and things are much different than they used to be. And so COVID was much different in Canada than it was in Florida. So we had some pretty tight lockdowns. In Nova Scotia specifically, at one point, there was checkpoints on where we could not travel from one community to another. We were locked down in our towns.
So like police officers.
That's right.
Do you call them Mounties?
Well, yes. RCMP.
They ride a horse,
They don't ride a horse.
drinking
You got
maple
Mounties
syrup.
up there. And they're standing at like the town border, and they're not going to let you transition from town to town. It's like that restrictive. Is that?
At one point it was.
Wow.
I wanted to buy a welding helmet at a neighboring town, so I snuck over through the back roads so I could buy my welding helmet. My wife just kept telling me, don't you get caught.
Yeah.
At one point they had rules where you weren't allowed to sing in church. Now, it didn't happen to us, but I had friends where government workers went by and listened underneath the windows to see if they were singing or not.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Now, there's kind of a rising star in Canadian politics. I forget his name. He's
Pierre.
a populist.
Pierre.
Yes, and you like him, I think.
do like
right?
him.
Yeah, I've seen some little shorts.
I will
of
vote
him.
for Pierre.
Okay.
I will.
And so is he running against Trudeau?
He is.
Okay. Good.
We're hoping to have an election next year.
So what are some contrast him a little bit with President Trump? They would call both of those men populists, but you have more reservations about President Trump than you would about Pierre, I think, just from knowing you. Or are they both very similar?
So conservatives in Canada are not the same as the Republican Party.
Okay.
So Canada is so liberal. It'd be more similar to the Conservative Party in England, where they'd be more fiscally conservative than socially conservative. And so Pierre did go on record on wanting to restrict hormone-changing drugs for minors. But for the most part, our hot-button topics like abortion, the LGBT agenda, that's sailed, right? That's not even on any of the platforms. It's not. So you would have individuals be very pro that, but as far as a party platform, that's not a thing.
So does Pierre talk about those topics?
Only when pressed upon. So again, somebody did corner him on the hormone changing drugs, and he addressed that, but it's usually not mentioned.
Okay.
Like we're never going to go back to restrictions on abortion. We're never going to go back on gay marriage. That ship has sailed. So when we talk about conservatives, it's mostly fiscally. Mostly.
Interesting. Talk to us about the cost of living in Canada. Is it different than it is in the U.S.?
Well, socialism takes a lot of money to
For sure.
make that machine go, right?
Yeah.
And so things are pretty high. Cost of living is expensive. It'd be very similar to some of the U.S. states like California,
Okay.
where you have a lot of government money in New York going out for things.
Yeah.
I was telling your sons on the way here that our gas would be about $6.05 a gallon, the equivalency.
Oof, though.
It's insane.
And income tax is very expensive. But one of the nice things is if I fall down and break my arm, I don't owe anybody $25,000. So that's a blessing.
Okay. Now you mentioned money. So like you don't use U.S. dollars in Canada, obviously. What do you guys use? What little fun
Loonies
money?
and toonies or something like that?
Yeah, what is it?
So we have the Canadian dollar.
Okay.
So some of the differences is that we don't have a $2, $1 bill. We have coins. And we also don't have pennies.
Is it called loonie? Is that what you said?
It is called a loonie because there's a picture of a loon on it.
Okay.
Now the toonie has a polar bear, but if you have a loonie, you gotta have a toonie.
There was a Canadian kid in our economics class, and Mr. Smith absolutely made fun of the loony and toonie every single day when Thomas was in there. It was so
So
funny.
the good thing about it is if you have a change jar, you can get lots of money in a hurry because you're throwing $1 and $2 bills in your change jar.
Yeah, true.
Not just quarters. Yeah, adds up fast.
Yeah. So you serve the Lord as a pastor. Could you tell us about your calling? Like as a kid, did you know God wanted you to be a pastor? Talk about that process.
So I got saved when I was 16. We were not a church family. I was kind of like would have been a bus kid. And I was not called to preach in the traditional sense. Now, sometimes when people hear that, they wonder. And so I was going to be a firefighter. I had joined the fire department when I was 16. And when I was 18, finishing up high school, I'd gone to northern BC and done training for forest firefighting. I've been accepted into a local college to take forestry. And that was my plan and my life direction. And a guy in my church asked me, would I be interested in going to Bible college? And I said, no, we're not doing that. And he said, would you pray about it? And I said, no, we're not doing that either. And so the summer of 99, which was my high school graduation year, the whole Pacific Northwest was on fire. Washington State, Montana, Alberta, BC, and all the fire crews went out, including mine, but I never got the call. I could never figure out why. So I'm sitting at home, washing dishes for my high school job, frustrated as all can be that I didn't get didn't get the call. Now I see in hindsight it was God's providential hand that kept me from going. But at the time I didn't understand why. And then one night at work, washing dishes with my high school job, I came under incredible conviction about the need to surrender. So my break, I surrendered. And I called the guy at church. And I said, hey, listen, I'll go to this goofy Bible college thing you're talking about. I give in. And he had recommended that I go to this school in Greenwood, Indiana. Now at that time, because I was not a church kid, I had not heard of any other Bible colleges anywhere. So as far as I knew, there was one Bible school in the entire universe. And it just happened to be in Greenwood, Indiana. So I got to my mom and I said, Mom, what about me going to Bible school? And she said, absolutely not. So I did everything behind her back. And then 2 weeks before I was supposed to go, I sat Mom down and I said, I'm not going to be a firefighter. I'm not going to Southwood College. I'm going to Bible college. And she said, the heck you are. Didn't say heck. And I said, I am. Got out a map, figured out where Indiana was, and drove 3 days to get there.
Wow.
And then after 1 year, I surrendered to a second year. And after a second year, I surrendered for a third year. After a third year, I surrendered to a fourth year. And then I surrendered to the next church. And so as far as the calling goes, it wasn't ever a surrender to preach. It was always a surrender for God's direction in my life, or whatever that would be.
Amen.
So I never had a lightning bolt of the call to preach. It was a call to surrender the direction he has for me.
Yeah, that's a great way to say it. And then a formative influence for both of us is Pastor Monty. So when you were getting your training at Indiana Baptist College, at some point, I think you took up residence in Monty's house. Of course, I grew up in his house.
Yeah.
And I was married real young, so while you were getting your training and everything. So talk to us about Pastor Monty's mentoring of you and our shared friend, Dr. Monty.
Sure. So as we're headed down to Bible college, there's another guy with me. And the pastor that had recommended us to go down there, he had given us the names of 2 churches for us to check out and attend while we're in Bible school. And then Dr. Monty, somehow through the grapevine, found out that there's these 2 Canadian preacher boys coming down to school. And so he called Canada and said, I want them to come to my church.
You got Trudeau on the phone.
Yeah, Justin was on the phone.
Canada.
Yeah, he called
Did
Pastor.
you share that phone number with us?
He called Pastor Klein.
Okay. Yeah.
And he didn't just call once. Like he could be pretty aggressive when there's something that he wants.
Yes, Pastor Monty.
So he called 5 or 6 times.
Yeah.
And these other guys hadn't called once. And we're driving down. I remember talking to my friend Rich, saying, this Monty character keeps calling, won't leave us alone. And I actually said to Rich, I bet that he has a very large, very unattractive daughter that he cannot marry off. And he's going to try to convince, bamboozle these naive Canadians to marry his fat daughter. And so I thought, why else would he want it so badly, right?
Right.
Oh my goodness gracious.
And so we get this back before cell phone. So we get to the church. We walk across the street to that gas station.
Yeah.
And I call the number on this piece of paper that I have. And then we're wandering around the church waiting for him to get there. And he shows up. And what I found out afterwards is that he did not have a very fat, unattractive daughter. He just loves to pour his life into preacher boys.
He does.
Right? And he loves to mentor. And I was telling you boys, so my mom and dad have been married and divorced 7 times between the 2 of them. And so for mostly, it was my mom and my brother and myself, and then a myriad of stepdads in and out. It was pretty unstable. And so I would see my dad every summer, but he lived in Alberta. We were in a different province. And so Monty became, like for you, the stable father figure that I had. I love my biological father, but he wasn't there, right? He was away. So during the summertime, I never went back to Canada. I stayed and worked in the U.S. and lived in Monty's basement. And so he became just that confidant, that father figure. And you can't put into words the impact on ministry, philosophy of fatherhood, philosophy of marriage, everything.
Yeah.
That I got from him.
Yeah. And for both of us, we were at a very formative phase in our lives, and he spoke into our lives in very helpful ways during those moments. And you and I, of course, having been friends for 25 years, have a lot of shared friends.
Yeah.
And we're in a group text with a bunch of other pastors. Maybe give some shout outs or some thoughts about our shared friends. And of course, I did a podcast with our friend Brock Evans, which aired a couple weeks back. And Mark Ward's podcast comes out, the time we're recording this is on a Thursday. So I sat down with Mark Ward. It comes out tomorrow, I think. So yeah, talk about kind of what our friend group means to you.
So our shared group chat, some of the guys have gone AWOL. They don't hear very much from them anymore. We're going to call those boys out. And so just like when you have a family, I don't know if you guys boys do this, when you have a family, you have one family member which holds everyone else together. It's often the matriarch or the patriarch,
Right.
and they're responsible for making sure all the aunts and the cousins, and they come to a family reunion.
Right.
Okay, this guy right here is our patriarch.
Oh,
so
wow.
he is the one that holds the group chat together.
There we go.
And so we have some that don't show up very often. We have others that are more often, like Pastor Ward and Pastor Evans, but this guy is a patriarch that he's the glue that holds that group together.
There we go.
100%.
Wow, I'm honored by that. Yeah.
Well, you are.
Can we throw out some more names of people in this group chat?
Yes.
No,
No, okay.
No.
because I just called them all lame.
The ones that are too quiet in there. Yeah. Well, absolutely. They need to get with it, especially when we're having good conversation.
That's right.
We've sorted out some of the world's biggest issues. That's your king. We really have.
That's funny. Going back to your calling, I think that one of the most overlooked aspects of your calling specifically is being able to grab a map and go to a college in Indiana.
Yeah.
That's absurdly hard to do. I could not do that. Get like an actual paper map, figure out roads, figure out where to turn, figure out how to get to a college that's, 3 days travel away.
That's something I made my boys do, is put away the GPS, get out an old school map, and learn how to navigate it.
I think that'd be really cool to learn.
And this is even the days. Do you remember printing out the MapQuest
Yeah.
directions?
Those were good days, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I like it better. I like MapQuest better. Oh, I actually liked a full map or atlas.
The Atlas.
better.
That's what we would use. That's right. Yeah.
I like that better because now we use the map app on our phone, and that means that Mark Zuckerberg knows everywhere we're going, or any of these tech titans.
For the sake of people listening, obviously, and
Lack of
not for
privacy.
myself, what is MapQuest?
Oh, it's a website. Yeah.
You just get like a map and it'll print it off the map.
So before
that
you would
need.
leave, you'd go to your computer and print paperwork, and you'd get in your car and obey it.
You
and
like
start
that
to-
more than the GPS?
Yes, because we've given up so much privacy now.
You're right.
It aggravates me in the mornings when I get in my vehicle and I'm coming here.
Yeah,
I'm
no, it
coming
does that
here,
to me too. It
and the
says go
phone
to work,
tells me
7 minutes to
it
work.
knows I'm
yeah.
going to NorthStone.
Yeah.
And I'm like, stop following me. I don't need you to prompt me right now.
So when I was in Indy, and I do this wherever I live now, is I would put the phone down, and then when I go back and forth from work, I would take a new route each time, get lost,
There you
and
go.
then make myself find my way out.
Yeah.
And so you become very confident in the streets of wherever you're at,
Yeah.
because you're forced to know the old-fashioned way.
Yeah,
So I do it now when I'm in a new spot too.
You probably still know Indianapolis really well, even though you haven't been there for quite a while.
I would still remember all the main roads for
Yes,
sure.
because you and I were picking up youth center kids in buses and vans.
And the paper route we did.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. And you had to learn geography of the area you live. You couldn't just trust an app.
That's right.
So do you have your CDL then? If you were picking up people on buses,
I did.
you
But it
did.
had
Is
six
that you have to
lives.
renew it or something?
You would have to, yes.
Gotcha. Interesting.
Now, I haven't prepped you for this question here, but I know you were trying to go see the naval base. You're trying to
Yes.
get on the naval base so you could go to the museum.
Yes.
Did any of that work out for you? Because you're a Canadian.
We're going to try it tomorrow. We haven't tried it
Okay.
yet.
Okay, so we've tried behind the scenes to get you in.
So I looked on the website, and it mirrored what your people said, is that as long as I'm accompanied by a real U.S. citizen,
Which is your wife.
and she has to drive. I can't drive. She has to be behind the wheels. We go through on the base.
Okay.
Then she has to do a background check there at the guardhouse.
Yeah.
And if she gets the thumbs up, then they'll let me through.
Okay. And you had a worse experience trying to get into the White House, right? Is that right?
Well, no, I never tried because they wouldn't let me.
Oh,
like
okay.
when I checked into it, they just no. At one
Just 'cause you're
point,
Canadian.
At one point before 9/11, you could go through if you had your ambassador through the consulate hook you up with a tour, but they have since stopped that.
Okay. Now, a little bit of a personal question and kind of a fun question for you. When we became friends 25 years ago, you had hair. What is life like being a bald pastor?
I love it.
Okay.
And so my dad went bald at age 25, so I knew what I was getting myself into. And I'm not completely bald, but my hair is thin. And so
Mine is too, right?
I was never going to be one of those guys that pretends to have hair when you don't. You know, like you can see through it,
Right,
and they got like a wisp up here, but they're bald back here, or they got this comb over. I just was gonna
It gets to a point where it stop pretending.
right. We're just gonna be honest with ourselves
yeah.
And call what it is.
Yeah.
And so when you get to the point where you could see through my hair, I said we're not playing this game anymore, and we just begin to buzz it.
Okay.
I plan on going bald one day.
Yeah.
Like I'm gonna intentionally grow a beard, like a
Yeah.
nice one. Dustin Odom's the guy in our church. People listening know who that is. I wanna get the bald going. Nice little beard.
The maintenance-free part of it is fantastic.
Okay.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Now they say.
Now I do get sunburn more easily, so I got to be aware of that.
Yeah, sunscreen your head.
Yeah, or wear a hat.
There you go.
Yeah. Now the right razor is the key,
It is.
right? So if you get the cheap razors, you end up cutting your head.
So I have one of those deals. It fits in your palm. and it has 3 blades, and you just
Is
go
that
like
called
this.
the pit bull or
I
something?
have no idea what it's called. My wife got it for me.
Okay,
I'm
yeah.
not sure.
You like it though?
Yeah, I do.
It's
Yeah.
clean. It's pretty like
is
clean.
clean,
shaven.
yep.
I have one that I use for my face, but it doesn't. It just leaves stubble still.
Yeah, it doesn't work real good for the face, but it works pretty good up top.
I might have to try it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll let you know what
I'm
now
not
on.
Right. Okay, here's a question for a Canadian. Have you found yourself liking maple syrup more than the average person would since you live in Canada?
I love maple syrup. Love it. Love it so much that I will drink it from the bottle or with a spoon.
That's
And in fact, I actually made my own maple syrup for several years. So we had maple trees in my yard.
Yeah.
And I tapped them with buckets and got the sap and boiled it down. It became extremely expensive, far
that's
cheaper
it.
just to buy it from the store, but it's your own stuff, right? So it just tastes better. So yes, I love maple
I
syrup.
think it's so cool when people can do that. Like the Kaisers, like they'll show up with their drinks that it's all just natural stuff or like things that they grow themselves. They'll eat that stuff like that. I think is really cool. Like the Odoms used to have their own jerky. They would make their own beef jerky.
yeah.
We need to learn how to do that.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so, like the Maritimes is pretty self-sufficient, and so we made our own maple syrup for almost 18 years. I cut and split all my own firewood. We burned wood and cut it all and split it all by hand. Did that for years and years and years. Miss that.
So when we think of stereotypes for Canadians, I think of at the end. Do Canadians have any like stereotypes for Americans?
So when I came down to Bible college,
Yeah.
I was very naive and was terrified of tornadoes, guns, and the Ku Klux Klan. No idea. And so the stereotype would be, again now, toting an AR-15 with a MAGA hat running around, draped in a Trump flag. Now, where I was in Nova Scotia, that was a little anti-American.
Oh.
But where I am now in Ontario, because we're a border community, we actually have the American flag on our platform in church beside the Canadian flag.
Do you really?
Because we have so many Americans in our church.
Okay,
The
sure.
border community is just part of the fabric.
Sure. Yeah.
And so Jacinda feels very much at home.
Good for
where
her.
we're at now.
Good. What do you do for home defense if guns are outlawed in Canada? We joke about how Canadians have butter knives up there. That's all that's allowed.
Have a baseball bat.
There you
Okay.
go. What brand?
Louisville
Whatever's
Slugger.
going to whack.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Is it true? I could totally be remembering something wrong, but I remember someone telling me that like Canadians will leave meat out of the fridge and they just leave it out overnight, like sitting on a thing and on the counter, and then they'll eat the next day. I could be totally wrong about that.
I've never seen that before.
Okay, maybe
Now, Ontario does have milk in bags. Have you heard that
milk
before?
in bags. That's
Milks in
absurd.
bags, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow, I don't
So
know that I could do that.
So if you see somebody with a carton of milk, it means they went across the U.S. and got it from Buffalo.
Oh, it's
They
like
sell it in the grocery
prime,
store.
like it's strictly bags.
Yeah, you could only buy it in bags.
Wow.
In Ontario. Nova Scotia had cartons and bags. I don't know why. but in Ontario, it just comes in bags.
Interesting.
That's
Okay.
very interesting.
Now, you married an American.
I did.
Talk to us about Jacinda's role in ministry, being a pastor's wife. What are ways that she's co-labored with you and been a real help in your ministry?
So I'm fully aware that my wife is the most important part of my ministry. Like, she is fantastic. Pastor's kid, grew up in the ministry, and is
A Hoosier, too.
a Hoosier too.
Grew up in
Amen.
Indiana. Yeah.
When I was young and immature, it took me a long time to realize that my wife is not just like me, and to appreciate the things that she is. And so, my wife's not an outdoorsy girl. She doesn't like to fish. She doesn't like to hike. She doesn't like to camp. She doesn't like to go for runs. That's not her thing. And so it would frustrate me if I want to go for hikes and she didn't, or I wanted to go fishing and she didn't. But in my maturity, I began to focus on what she is good at, right? And she is a tremendous helpmeet, duty-bound, one of those people that just makes no excuses. Whatever needs to be done, jumps in, hard worker, never stops. Could not ask for a better wife.
Amen.
Definitely married up.
There you go.
Yeah. Talk to us about your kids, and maybe give our listeners some parenting tips.
So I got 3. So the oldest one, Nathaniel, did a year West Coast, and now he is in the trades apprentice in Halifax and very involved in a church plant. They're doing great.
How old is Nathaniel now?
20. And then Jake is 19, and he is an engineering student at Pensacola. Then my daughter Karis is 17, and she has surrendered to the ministry, and she's 90% sure she'll be Pensacola as well.
Good.
And so, for parenting, number 1 is prayer, right? Both our boys went to public school. Karis didn't, but the boys did. So that brought forth some additional challenges. Lots of prayer, lots of conversations. Consistency is a huge part.
For sure.
When we had our kids growing up, we made our expectations very clear that they didn't have to guess on things. Discipline and punishment was very clear. Like you, I grew up in an abusive household. And so when I see parents do what I call the grab and whack, their kids are bad, so they just grab them and then they wail on them so they feel better. That's abusive in my eye, and I hate it when I see it happens.
Yeah.
And so, certainly not against spanking, but everything was very controlled and measured, and our children knew that if they broke this rule, that this was exactly the punishment that was going to happen. They didn't have to guess on it. Consistency was very important to us.
For sure.
And then honesty. Something we wanted to do early on is that our kids are not stupid, and they know when mom and dad screw up. And again, probably like you, my household was a place where it was do as I say, not as I do. And stepdads were never wrong, never said sorry, never said I love you, none of that. And so when we blew with our kids, we were honest and asked for forgiveness and wanted to do right. And just what we taught our kids is we shouldn't sin. But when we do sin, let's be honest with what that sin is. So we're gonna call it what it is, take steps to fix it, take steps not to do it again, and just be honest and real with it. And it's just like politics.
Yeah.
It's the cover up which gets you more in trouble than the original
Yeah.
transgression most of the time.
Sure.
So prayer, consistency, and honesty.
Those are great answers.
Great.
As a parent yourself, you mentioned the stepdad's not saying I love you and never being wrong. As a parent yourself, have you ever had to say to your kids, hey, I've messed up and please forgive me?
Well, that's in the honesty part, absolutely.
Yeah.
Lots and lots and lots.
Okay.
Because again, they know, right?
Yeah,
They see it. And so when we're telling them, you need to be honest with your sin and apologize and make things right to your siblings.
Yeah.
They expect the same thing from us.
I think that goes a long way in the kid's mind as far as not just the authentic nature of who we are, but the authentic nature of our faith in Christ.
Right.
When we say, I'm sorry I failed here and you saw my failure, it shows them that we have a sense of divine accountability.
100%.
Yeah.
I've had to do that as a pastor too. I actually found that harder as a pastor than as a parent. To go to people in your church and say, I have failed you in this area. Would you forgive me? And
Now, you're still new in Ontario. You probably haven't had to do that there, but you did it at Bethel?
oh yeah,
Yeah. Okay. How long were you at Bethel?
18 years.
Okay, that's terrific. Yeah.
That genuineness allows you to be so much more relatable as a pastor for them. You know what I'm saying? Like if I mess up and I tell my friend like, hey, I messed up, then we become on a team together to fight the sin that we're arguing or we're figuring out together. You know,
Yeah.
it helps if you the leadership understand the leadership doesn't think they're perfect in any way. They come down to your level in the fact of, okay, we both struggle with sin, so let's get sin and let's beat it together.
Exactly. 1 John 2, my little children, sin not, right? So we don't sin. There's no excuse for sin. Don't do it.
Yeah.
But then the next verse is when you do sin, Jesus made provision for that sin.
Right.
Right? And so the same idea. We don't do it, but when we do it,
Yeah.
let's call it what it is.
Yeah.
Be honest with it and make steps not to do it again.
And Proverbs 28, confess it and forsake it.
Exactly.
As much as we're able to. Yeah. Now, what do your kids call you? It's kind of interesting. You're a pastor. You're also their father. In some ways, I'm sure you're their friend. How do your kids refer to you? Do they call you dad or father or pastor?
Dad, always dad.
Yeah.
Never pastor, always dad. Never father.
Does your wife ever call you pastor? My wife does.
That would be really weird if your kids called you pastor. That would be really
Yeah,
weird.
my kids call me pastor. Yes. And I never asked them to do that. It just kind of happened. I do, people, when you become the pastor of a church, they ask you, maybe your people ask you.
They do.
You know, what should we call you? And sometimes people will give you several options. Should I call you pastor? Should I call you preacher? Or can I call you by your first name? Some pastors prefer that first name thing. I personally instructed our church. I've been here 8 years now, and at Temple I was there 8 years as well. But yeah, just go ahead and call me pastor, and here's why. Some guys say, call me by my first name because I'm, no respecter of persons, and it's all even at the foot of the cross. Just call me by my first name. I'm going to call you by your first name. But I personally feel like that is tearing down barriers that are actually necessary. And what I mean by that is every time somebody says to me, pastor, as soon as they invoke that, I'm very familiar with 1st and 2nd Timothy and Titus. It's like I have this title, and it's just a reminder to live up to it.
Right.
And some of these guys that get involved in scandals, and we have friends that we went to Bible college with, that it's heartbreaking, and churches are hurting because guys are in the pulpit and they're duplicitous, and we all are to some degree. I get it, and we want to take a Galatians 6:1 approach. But at some point, if there's an affair, she stopped calling him pastor and started calling him by his first name, And so I personally prefer that. But so when all the people in the church, our kids are PKs, they're growing up hearing people call me pastor. So even in our home, they pick that up somewhere along the way. Yeah. You got thoughts about that?
No.
Yeah. I think
I don't get... People in my church call me everything from preacher to pastor to my first name. And my response is, when my mom named me, she did not name me pastor, she named me Ryan. And so I recognize that's my title, but my own could be my own personality. It doesn't bother me.
Yeah, and it doesn't bother me either. People call me there's one fella in our church who loves to call me Brother James. He said, can I call you Brother James? I said, sure, call me that. That's fine. But there's a certain reverence he has even in that. He's such a deferential individual anyways.
Now, my favorite title is back in Nova Scotia. I had a very good relationship with the chief of police, and he used to call me Padre. And I did like that.
Ooh, okay. Yeah.
very nice.
That's good. Pastor King, didn't you used to have a motorcycle?
I never did.
Just for a blink? I thought you sent us a picture. Maybe you were thinking about buying one.
Yes.
Okay.
So my brother has a Harley he's getting rid of.
Okay.
And I've been kicking the tires on, maybe buying it from him. But I've never had one myself. I had dirt bikes as a kid,
Okay.
but never a street bike.
Yeah. Now Monty's got one. Monty's got a Road King.
I like Monty's. It's nice.
It's beautiful.
It's big.
He almost never rides it.
I know.
It's sad.
It sits in the garage.
Yeah. And he just spent $800 on new tires for it to sit in the garage.
Just sit in the garage.
Yeah. Because he doesn't feel coordinated enough to really handle it well.
Now, all three of my kids really want a bike. And
Okay.
so my wife is very against that.
Your daughter wants it.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, she's probably the most vocal of all, even with the boys.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
That's cool.
And your wife's against it. And
Yes.
what's your thoughts on it?
I'm not against it, but there's certain dangers with it for sure
Yeah.
that they need to be aware of.
Yeah. Okay.
When I was looking into it before, I came across saying that there's two types of people that ride: the ones that have put a bike down and the ones that haven't.
Right.
You can always tell the difference.
Yeah.
Because the ones that are wearing flip-flops and no shirt are the ones that have never put a bike down.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, my motorcycle accident wasn't that long ago. I mean, it's probably been 7 years ago now, but it still feels very fresh.
Yeah, I bet.
And even when I'm riding,
Are you hyper aware?
I'm hyper aware.
Yeah.
Yeah, much more than previously. And part of the collision, this lady pulled out in front of me, and it was about 5:30 in the evening in Pensacola. And if you're familiar with Pensacola, the sun is going down, and there's a lot of blind spots. The way when the sun is going down, it can be extremely difficult. She just didn't see me. I had a Harley, and I thought if they don't see me, they'll hear me. She didn't see me or hear me, so.
Have you talked to her since? Like, hey, I'm good. Have you checked in with her?
No.
Hey, you didn't kill me.
Yeah, no, like I've actually
So you
done a
know.
lot better ever since. Lost a lot of weight, thriving.
I'd like to look her up, but I think that they, on purpose, in a situation like that, the police want to leave those people anonymous.
Yeah.
So I think it'd be difficult for me to find out who that actually was. I don't know. Your mother has all the paperwork on it, but I probably should look her up.
Sure, Mark Zuckerberg could tell you.
Right? Yeah.
Know exactly where she was going
The
too.
Tech Titans.
Yeah.
Pastor King, do you have a life verse?
James 1:22. Picked it when I got saved when I was 16.
Amen.
Be doers of the word, not hearers only, deceiving your own selves.
That's good.
You mentioned a trying time in our lives in ministry with Ronnie Rutland. Maybe there's somebody listening to this podcast, they're seeking strength for their life. Could you give us some biblical explanation about trying times in one's life?
So for me, it's understanding the role of God's providence in that, right? And so God, in His sovereignty, allows or tailor makes things for me to aid in my Christ likeness. And so one of the things that I have reminded myself repeatedly is whenever a trial comes or problem comes, is this is an opportunity for me to exhibit the fruits of the Spirit.
Mm-hmm.
This is an opportunity for me to show the reality of Christ in my life. And then just hold on to God's faithfulness, right? So the songs we sing, hymns of the faith, where I'm anchored to the rock and on the solid rock. And when you have Christ where He's supposed to be, when the trials of life happen, we're not all over the place, right? There's a steadiness there because we're anchored to the rock.
Yeah.
It's not enjoyable, but it's not this huge highs and lows of depressive and then manic behavior, because there's a steadiness that Christ gives.
Mm-hmm.
And so when church pop problems come, or the stove breaks or the car breaks or whatever, it is recognizing the reality that God is using this to further my own Christ likeness. And now I'm on the hot seat, if you would, to show the fruits of the Spirit and the reality of my faith.
And in that moment, you get to apply James 1:22.
That's right.
You get to do it, not just
Right.
hear it.
You got it.
In those trying times. Yeah, it's very good.
Do you have a favorite hymn that you?
Come Thou Fount.
That's the go-to.
Come Thou Fount is my favorite hymn.
Yeah,
Good.
love that one.
There's a new song, well, newer song, All Because of Mercy by Casting Crowns that I really like as well. But as far as old hymns, it's Come Thou Fount.
It's good. It's good.
Hands down.
For sure.
Prone to wander, Lord, I feel it. Prone to leave the God I love.
That's
that
the verse.
resonates with me.
And that's the verse that speaks to me.
Yeah, it's good.
Because my heart will take and seal it.
Yeah,
Seal it for that courts above.
amen. It's a wonderful hymn. Really good.
Yeah.
It is.
Cool.
Good.
Speaking of casting crowns, which I know very little about,
I don't either.
but
I'm-
our shared friend, Mark Ward, he loves him some casting
he
crowns.
doesn't he have like a CC tattoo or something like that?
I don't think it's there.
Okay.
I think he has it placed somewhere else. But anyways, Mr. Ward, he is big into the casting crowns. He's jamming out to that
CCM.
Power FM in Mobile or whatever here. Yeah, it's broadcast here.
I don't know a lot about him either, but there's that one song that I heard and I like. All
Yeah.
Because of Mercy.
Yeah, we got to take some shots at Mr. Ward. He can handle it.
Yeah.
He can.
Yeah,
His broad
he
shoulders.
gives it out too. Yeah.
His
Good.
broad shoulders.
What? Yeah, because of them donuts. Hey, so his love for donuts.
Yeah.
You got a bucket list? Anything you want to do before the Lord returns or takes you home?
So what I mentioned before about not wanting to grow old afraid, my bucket list is attached to that. Okay. So it is goals that will aid in my growing old with physical certainty and mental certainty.
Mm-hmm.
So running a half marathon is on that goal list.
Great. Yeah.
That's a great.
Right now I'm almost done my ACBC certification, be certified counselor. And then I want to finish my MDiv and get my PhD. And so all of this is aiding myself in keeping my mind alert and my body alert.
It's good. Are you familiar with Peter Attia?
No.
Dr. Peter Attia?
Smart guy.
He is terrific on a lot of levels. He's somebody I would recommend people find on YouTube. He's got a podcast, Peter Attia does, but he talks a lot about the things you just described.
Okay.
And what Dr. Attia says, and he's relatively clean. You know, some of these podcasters will say things that are unnecessary, expletives or whatever. But Dr. Peter Attia talks about preparing yourself for the centenarian Olympics.
Okay.
And so if you get to live to be 100 years old, what are things you want to be able to do? And like a lot of guys will train for some kind of triathlon. You need to be training right now for the centenarian Olympics. So what you're doing in your 40s, we're both in our 40s, I think. What we do in our, we need to be right now working towards being 100 years old. So he identifies like maybe a dozen events, hypothetical events that you'll want to be physically capable of doing when you're 100 years old. For example, you will want to be able to deadlift at least 30 pounds because you'll have a great grandchild that you want to pick up and your arms. You'll want to be able to, do some kind of motion like this and put luggage into an airplane.
Sure.
You'll want to be able to get yourself out of maybe 4 foot of water, lift yourself up out. So it's like the food choices we're making now, the exercise routine we have now will prepare us if we do get to live that long.
Right. Because as you get older, when you fall and break a hip, that is
You're done.
You're done,
Some
right?
people-
And so
yeah, some people-
balance. And I heard a guy say it this way, that his goal is when he's 80 to be able to walk up Masada,
Okay.
right? So it's the same idea that when I'm in my 80s, I want to have certain
He's not taking the lift.
not taking a lift.
And he's probably not going in summer.
No,
He's going to walk. up the summer.
that's a winter trip.
That's a winter. I want to do that. Yeah.
me too.
When we went, it was in the summer. But yeah, awesome. Good. Anything else, Matthew, you want to add to this? Or
Not really. I mean,
Yeah.
that was pretty all inclusive.
Pastor King, this has been insightful. Thank you very much for joining us on the podcast today. It's always fun to fellowship with you.
This was the Christmas edition. We kind of got the
Absolutely.
the green and
100%.
green and
I
red.
like it. Yeah. We got
Well-
a couple. What were you going to say?
I'm wearing this because since I'm on vacation, I have church clothes and then I have shorts and a t-shirt. I have nothing in between.
There you go.
Oh, yeah.
So this is my Wednesday night outfit last night, and it was this or a t-shirt and shorts.
Looks good. Looks good.
That's all I got.
Looks good, brother.
Yeah, now you got additional stuff.
Now I got a
wanna
hat.
get you
Yeah,
some
there you
Sprinkle
go.
for Life merch, okay?
Thank you, sir.
This will keep some of the sun off
This
of
will.
that bald head right there. Okay, Pastor King. There you go.
Okay.
I want to give you a
Fire.
copy of Issues of the Heart, which is a book I wrote just maybe.
What do we think, chat? What do we think, chat? What do we think?
Look at sharp, man. Look at good. Repping well for Strength for Life.
Okay.
Good. Now, it is humid up where you live, you were mentioning, but I do have a hoodie for you as well. So when it cools down.
That is fantastic.
There you go. All right. So, yes, when you wear this stuff, remember to pray for Strength for Life.
Absolutely.
If you would. Yes. Thank you again for being with us.
Thank you for
today.
having me.
Yes. And thank you all very much for joining us on today's podcast. We trust that this dialogue was strength for your life, to the extent, of course, that it was Bible-based, because we recognize that God is our refuge and strength and that He is a very present help in trouble. If there are ways I can serve you as a pastor, I would sure like to do that. You can email me directly at pastor@northstonebaptist.org, and I would look forward to hearing from you. All right, God bless you all. Thanks again for joining us.